Hey everybody, as promised, I'm going to do a quick 3 to 5 minute video to preview Chapter 10, Employee Communication. I have two screens set up, so I'm going to be checking out my slides that you'll go through and also sort of pulling out the important information from Packet 3. As I mentioned, you don't have to turn in Packet 3, but you may want to have the packet out while you're reading to fill stuff in and while you're listening to this video / checking out the PowerPoint as a helpful way to take notes for the next test. So Chapter 10 is all about employee communication. It's a specialization of PR. We also call it internal communication or employee relations. So a big part of that work is ensuring that you have a healthy corporate culture where people are freely encouraged to participate, and you do your best to develop strong relationships with your employees, helping management negotiate all that. So today we'll talk a lot about what employee communication is, how PR plays into that, and how exactly you go about creating a culture. How do you do that? Organizational culture, there's a slide that talks about different kinds of organizational cultures. It gives you boxes to think about in terms of what a culture could be called. When you're thinking about organizational culture, it's the history of the organization, it's the character of the organization, it's the personality, it's the way things get done in an organization. It's the values, it's the symbols, it's the beliefs, it's the vibe. And you can be very intentional in that vibe that you create. And that's part of what we're doing in PR and developing our relationships and doing that employee communication. So you see some of those examples. There's innovative cultures. There's more aggressive and competitive kind of cultures. There's people-oriented cultures, team-oriented cultures, detail-oriented cultures. The culture of a startup technology firm is probably going to be different than like the pediatric hospital or a college or a small nonprofit. They all have different kind of cultures. There are a few videos that are in this PowerPoint that I recommend that you watch. They correspond with page 3 in the packet. It gets you to think about what a culture is, how exactly you go about building a strong culture, how do you get your employees more engaged in your culture, how do you get your employees more engaged using corporate social responsibility campaigns, and why exactly would you want your employees to be more engaged. So what does it mean to have engaged employees, and why would you want to have more engaged employees? There's also a part of your packet and a part of the PowerPoint that goes over what corporate culture traits are. Like what does a healthy corporate culture look like versus a non-healthy corporate culture? You want your employees to feel empowered. You want to have constructive relationships. You want to have morality and honesty in your culture. You also want to have diversity in your culture and have a social consciousness, getting back to that triple bottom line corporate social responsibility stuff. And there are different aspects that make up a culture, including the physical environment of the place where you work, the attitudes, beliefs, and personalities of the people that work there, as well as like the behaviors, like what do you do on an everyday basis? How does that come together to make your culture? We talk about two different kinds of cultures, authoritarian and more participative kind of cultures. Authoritarian, you'll see on the slide, there's examples of organizations that are more authoritarian, but there's centralized decision making. It's more about leaders at the top dictating how things should go. They're not really interested in your opinions or collaborating. You're valued for the work you do and being good worker bees, but they're not necessarily interested in having your ideas contribute to something in the organization other than your labor. Oftentimes the organization isn't open to outside feedback, and there might be a lot of departments and conflict. So very bureaucratized, very book to follow. You can think of like restaurant franchises, because there's a very corporate way to follow things, a very rules-based kind of way of doing things, strict ways. We've always done things this way. But then participative is more of a teamwork, collaborative kind of culture. It's very interested in bottom-up participation, hearing from the employees what works well, getting you to contribute to departmental goals, very much valuing teamwork. You're more empowered to share your ideas. Places like Best Buy, Google, I think YouCommunicate tries to do this kind of a culture, but there's authoritative and participative cultures. And you can also have strong and weak cultures. So you may have cultural values, but they're not enacted very strongly. Or maybe you have a very strong culture that comes through. I always ask the question, what culture you feel like you could thrive in? And also in the packet, it asks you to think about what kind of culture do you feel like you currently work in, or places where you have worked, what kind of cultures do you feel like they are? There is a video in the PowerPoint that asks if you could see yourself working at a place like this and that kind of a culture. Click on that video and see. PR efforts in employee communication have a lot of really good potential outcomes if you do the work and you build the relationships and that trust with your employees. If you're doing it well, you can communicate policies well and reduce the stress and uncertainty of your employees. You can increase the satisfaction and loyalty of your employees. You can increase the amount of feedback that you get as a company, which can help you grow and develop and innovate. You can increase the morale of your employees if you're building relationships with them and getting their feedback in more two-way communication kind of ways. And you might get people inside your organization to be brand ambassadors for you outside the organization, which is great. You want people talking positively about your organization. So how do you do that? How do you get people talking positively about you? There's a part which I think is helpful in your packets that asks you about a place that you work or you're working, and asks you to analyze the culture of that organization. What did they do well in terms of how they communicated with you? How could they do better? So take a little critical lens and do that. Think about that. Where have you worked? Was it authoritarian or participative? Did you thrive there? Why or why not? What could they have done better? Would you consider yourself an ambassador of that organization? Why or why not? The bottom line, if you like working with people and you like working inside organizations and you like solving problems, internal communication, employee communication might be for you. This is another reason why organizational leadership / HR is a nice match for PR, because PR, we got all this cool relationship building stuff. Employees are incredibly vital today, and we got to keep them happy. We got to communicate with them. We got to have good two-way communication and build strong cultures that people want to be loyal to and are happy to go to work for and can be brand ambassadors for. And ultimately, if you have happy employees, that reflects positively on the external face of the organization. It can also contribute to positive return on investment. So employee communication, it's another aspect of PR that you could get into. Live it, learn it, love it.